Hi, and welcome to Cover Brand, where we cover all things branding, marketing, and advertising to help you understand what the hell branding is and how it works to grow your business. Welcome and welcome back. I'm Ethan Decker, your host, and I am excited to have a buddy of mine, Perry, on the show. Perry Maughmer, how are you?
I'm great, Ethan. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I know sometimes you get out on the lake on your paddleboard in the
Yeah.
morning before your day starts. Was this one of those days?
No, it's still a little rainy and chilly. Now it's sunny now, so it might be this afternoon, but this morning was still a little bit questionable.
Now for paddleboarding, do you go out in any weather at all, or is it really about the chop and the wind, or is it really about rain and cold?
Rain and cold, like the chop and the wind present its own challenges, but you can get through that, but it's just no fun when it's not sunny. So I don't tend to go out if it's not sunny and it's too chilly. Yeah, I'll just stay in.
That's great. That's great. I'm out in Colorado, and one of our phrases is "There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing." And I'm sure it's really, really true if you're like in the Northwest, where it's always rainy or damp or drizzly.
Yeah, I
But
would assume so.
yeah, but out here it's like, well, if it's a rainy, cold, windy, snowy, whatever day, just if you got the right gear and you want to go do it, and if that's what you want to do, like it
Yeah.
sounds like for you, part of the beauty of it is the sun.
Yeah, I love it when the sun's out because we don't get that many sunny days in Central Ohio. So when it is out, it's quite a celebration.
Nice. So help the listeners learn a little bit about your business and what you've been up to lately.
Okay, just real quickly, the last 10 years I've been a Vistage chair, so I do peer advisory groups for Vistage. And so my work is largely based on I work with leaders and leadership teams for small to mid-sized companies, and I've done that for about 10 years, and I do it in groups and individually. And so when we come together in groups, it's kind of peer consulting. We have a lot of conversations. We have, great folks like you come in and talk to us about interesting topics. And then I also do work outside of that sometimes with their teams to do some implementation work.
Nice. Yes, that is how we met. I'm also in a Vistage group here in Denver, and I know you call them peer groups, peer support groups. I see it like as a support club or support group
Yeah.
where people in similar boats as you get together and talk about what it's like to run the business that you run. Yeah.
Yeah, and it largely works because everybody has the same set of challenges. I mean, there are different industries, there's different timing, there's different size, but the reality is that there's a handful of problems that everybody experiences, and that's why it works because that brings it enables everybody to understand what you're talking about, but give a different point of view because they have a different lived experience through their industry.
Right. It's great you say that. I came into marketing through advertising basically, and a lot of brands are like, "Well, in my business it's different, or for my brand it's different, or for my category it's different." And my science training, because I have a science background, was very much looking for those universals. What do all trees have in common? And not just all trees, what do all organisms have in common? Or what do all ecosystems have in common? And there are things, and that's also true in brands. That's also true in marketing. And that, as you
Mhm.
say, that's also true in business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So you've had this great opportunity in the past decade to see dozens, if not hundreds, of leaders of small to mid-sized organizations struggle with and figure out their companies and their brands. And then I came out last summer?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
to Central Ohio and spoke with a few of your groups and talked about the laws and the levers of brand science. And what I'd love to do today is hear what are some of the things that you saw as being impactful or meaningful or useful to the folks in your Vistage groups, because that will help people understand, well, what does the impact of this brand science stuff really look like? And so
Yeah, and
that we can start there.
okay, and I mean, it's relatively easy because it's all in the name, right? Brand science. So, I mean, the science piece I think is the most important because it adds, you have we have qualitative and quantitative things, right? And by and large, most business owners think about marketing as qualitative. It's how
Right.
it feels and design and all. And so for you to come in and add the quantitative piece of this and to show there is research out there that you can look at and understand the impact. And I think that's the most moving piece, because before that, they people look at brand as something they might do, but not necessarily something that's going to move the business forward and be able to determine an ROI on.
Right.
And you're able to show people how that is definitely not the case.
Right. Yeah, it's true. People see brand as soft and smushy. And certainly, well, let me ask, how many of your Vistage members are B2B versus B2C?
I would say 80% of them are B2B at
Okay,
least.
so right, 80% are business to business companies.
Mhm.
Um, the rest actually do deal with consumers and therefore consumer marketing. They're
Yeah.
probably the ones, I'm guessing, who are a little bit more attuned to brand or see it as more
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah, but you know this as well as I do. They see advertising as more valuable. They don't necessarily they don't differentiate, they don't see the demarcation between the two. And so they spend a lot of time and money on advertising, and sometimes without success, because they don't pay attention to the brand. As to your point, is your content, right? Big B, little b, the brand, right?
Right.
And so I think that's an important differentiation, because without spending that time, I've always defined this for years ago, came up with for me, the brand was an external communication of an internal alignment,
Nice.
right? And so
I like that.
when people struggle and they say, well, we're not getting any traction from our advertising, I go back and ask them, well, what are you saying? Like, if you don't understand what you're saying, then it isn't landing with anybody. There's no clarity for them or conviction.
Right, right. And you need that clarity or conviction inside
Mhm.
before anyone outside even understands it.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure you find out when you do this work with companies, you're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't go in there to create something. You go in there to actually help them understand what they already are. Like, it already exists. You're just trying to quiet down the noise so that they can come to the surface and everybody suddenly goes, oh, that's it. And you're like, yeah, that's been here all the time. Like, I
That is
didn't
the
invent it.
best way to do it. Yeah, it's true. And for a lot of the times you're right, people will bring me in where the brand's already created or already established. Sometimes these really, really big old brands like Duracell or Gillette or Kellogg or Frosted Flakes, right? And so
Mhm.
yeah, there it's a lot of folks, they've had turnover over the decades where the brand has been in operation and maybe everyone inside doesn't quite know, well, what does the brand really mean or what's its conviction? Or how do we communicate any of that stuff with a sharp point to it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for some of your companies, your clients, there's they have a brand, but it's kind of soft. They've never given it that much attention. So when it comes to like, yeah, we've talked about big B, little b. Big B is your whole reputation. Big B
Mhm.
brand is what do you know of Starbucks? Well, it's the shops and it's the coffee and it's the burnt taste and it's those funny words. But it's also the green logo, but it's also Howard Schultz, who ran for president a few years ago. And all that's your big B brand. And then there's your little b brand, which is your logo and your colors. When it comes to your folks in your groups, do they tend to err on one side or the other in terms of I just think about my reputation or I just focus on the brand colors and the logo and the fonts?
Well, here's what's interesting for me. Come from small, medium-sized businesses, right? And a lot of them are owner operated. So
Yep.
that's, I think, an important demarcation. But I think the challenge they have is those people, by and large, don't pay attention to either one. Like, especially, I have a lot of multi-generational owners, and so I think the most dangerous thing is the assumption that everybody knows what I know,
Right.
right? That it's been around, well, it's already exists, right? I mean, people know
Right.
it. They know I'm going to say they know the name,
Yes.
right? And the name isn't the brand. Now, it can be part of the brand,
Yep.
but I don't, just like with anything else, there has to be regular maintenance performed on it, right?
Yeah.
And there has to be updates, and there has to be sometimes a reinvigoration of it because of the turn you mentioned earlier, the turnover. And people who used to know my brand, maybe they're retired or they passed away, or that was 2 generations ago. And I
Yeah.
think that it's really important that people pay attention to it, because it isn't, And I'm sure you run into this. Like people think I have a website. Well, that's not your brand. Like
Right.
that's a representation, but that isn't a brand. The
Correct.
brand is the brand is how you speak. The brand is how you show up. The brand is how you dress. The brand is all of these things,
Yep.
right? And unless I have focus on it, and and I'll go to this next step, uh, unless I place importance on it, and I happen to believe there's a ton of importance because I believe it reduces friction,
Right.
right? Because there's friction inside and outside the organization. We can't manage outside friction because it comes from things we can't control, but
Right.
we should do our best to reduce internal friction. And if we have strong conviction around our brand and it's clearly communicated both internally and externally, then it reduces friction for us to get things done.
Yeah. It's clarity and it's intentionality. I think that's a great point. I did do a project with one of your members on just this thing. His company was growing and he had a pretty clear sense of what his brand was. He wasn't sure if his clients or prospects saw it the same way. So that was a great opportunity to say, well, part of building a brand is knowing what people think of you at all
Mhm.
and how they see you. And then he also really brought me in because he wanted to create a toolkit for new people who were joining the company. They do financial management,
Mhm.
so they wanted their financial managers to really live and breathe the same thing that he lives and breathes, and make sure that there's alignment, favorite term in marketing, right? In business, or just make sure that people walked the talk and lived and breathed the same thing he saw the brand being. So we really did just focus on uh, um, focus on the brand. Like, what is the brand really, and how do we boil it down to a few things that people can just get and then use? And then intentionality, which is, are we living it? Are we doing the things that are required so that the internal folks are behaving the way we want and doing the things we want them to do, and then our external folks, our customers and our prospects, also see what we want them to see.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a leverage point, right? And I think that I don't think people stop and just think about how they can how they can consolidate these thoughts and it makes sense from a lot of different perspectives. I will tell you the biggest push that I've made with the folks that I work with now around brand is around what brand from an employment standpoint. You know,
Yeah.
what is the brand? Because I keep telling them your brand has to make sense to multiple stakeholders, right?
Yep.
It has to make sense to people inside, has to make sense to the people you're trying to hire, has to make sense to the people you're trying to serve, right? So, but you want there to be a cohesive brand that speaks to all of those and not differently. Like you don't want a different brand on all sides. You
Right.
find find that melody line, right? You find that thing that pulls through all of that. And I was just with a group yesterday, the second generation independent insurance agency,
Mhm.
and they were talking about their internal and external, let's say their why, like why they existed. And
Sure.
the owner's like, I love doing this, not for selling insurance, because I like to see, he talking about his teammates. He said, I like to bring people in and watch them grow and realize their potential. And I
Nice.
said, but wait a minute, don't you also do that with clients? Like, couldn't that be the through line? Like,
Right.
isn't that's why you do what you do there, because you want to see, because they serve owner operator in the construction industry. And I said, don't you like to see those folks grow and realize their potential? I said, so you've got this leverage point that works for all of your stakeholders.
Right. Right. It's the simplicity and clarity. Because honestly, we all have way too much in our day and way too much in our lives and way too much in our brains to parse out anything about any other brands that are extraneous to all that. And I like to say brand is also a shorthand. It's a shortcut
Mhm.
for people, like to help them think less when it comes to shopping, to think less when it comes to their services and products. I don't really want to think about toilet paper, but if there's a brand I like and a brand I know and I can rely on it, then when I go to the store, I know which one to grab and I know it's going to
Mhm.
deliver on that experience.
Yeah, and I don't think that leaders inside organizations actually think about the power of brand internally when I communicate with my team.
Yes. Yes. Classic example. And I love to bring it down to the concretes, right? We're talking about a lot of abstract things so far. So when it comes to concretes, we would do a campaign externally, like an ad campaign, and we would get voice talent, or we would come up with a mascot. We would come up with a catchphrase like, we have the meats, or, um, there's $12 for the tickets, $22 for the food, spending a day with your kid back from home or back home first time in 5 years, priceless. And we focus on that kind of catchy, sticky, interesting stuff when it comes to consumers, but then we send a literal memo to our colleagues. And it's gray, it's words, 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 words,
Mhm,
and it's complex and none of it's sticky and none of it's interesting.
mhm.
Like, talk about a double standard.
Yeah, and the ones creating friction, right? If you, I mean, you're
Yeah,
the people that you need to communicate most clearly, and you need to have them bought into the brand, to do all the work. And by the way, they want to buy it. Like
right.
they want a reason to believe.
Yeah. They wanna
Eh,
be motivated, they wanna feel excited, they wanna be part of something. So that's a great thought, and I haven't seen a ton of it. I do have a friend, Shannon, who works at a company which is all about internal or marketing the company as an employer.
Yeah.
So it is marketing, it's advertising, it's coming up with cool phrases or brand image, but it's to entice employees.
Mm,
So it really is that notion of internal branding, so to speak. But what about this phrase? I'm just thinking about it. The first campaign is internal,
mm. Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
Like,
What
yeah, you got to
and
figure out your brand. You got to get clarity on it. You got to get precision on it and intentionality. But then your first campaign is internal, not external.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of companies not do this. I've seen them launch external campaigns to their consumers or to their B2B prospects without ever really rolling it out internally to their own team.
Well, yeah, and on top of that, you have so much, let's say there's so much to change and transition in business nowadays. Things are
Mhm.
moving at a very fast pace. You're constantly evolving, right?
Right,
Internally. Well, you would never dream of not communicating that externally to your customers, right? You always have this. Um, there's a certain amount of communication externally that you always want to keep. There's a baseline. You always want to keep communicating with your potential clients or customers. And
right.
then when you have something else to say, you can ramp it up. But you always want to be present, but we
Yes.
don't apply that same rigor internally. And then we come up with these, oh, we're going to do this now. So then we just shoot out, to your point, this memo
A
that has
memo.
like 8 paragraphs in an email as an attachment that nobody reads. And there's no emotion to it. Like there's no connection
Right,
to it, as opposed to thinking about the same thing you just said, which is, what is my communication strategy inside the organization for this year based on all
right,
the initiatives we're going to do? And where's that steady flow of communication from a branding perspective? If I looked at them like my internal customer,
right.
how should I communicate with them?
Have you ever seen someone really do it well?
No, no, I've never seen anybody. I got to tell you, most people look at, I mean, you've worked with a lot of owners and a lot of businesses, and you know that by and large, you know, marketing ranks right up there with, finance and sales.
Yep.
They're people, they're necessary evils. Like I know I have to have somebody do them, but I certainly don't have any trust in them. And
Right.
it's like voodoo. It's like I don't know what these people are doing. I don't
Yep.
understand it. So no, I've never seen anybody truly embrace this and understand the power behind it and actually leverage it.
Yeah, that's crazy because you've done this for a long time. You've seen a lot of small businesses.
Well, I will take that back. There's one. There's a design firm that has done an exceptional job to the point where they hired a marketing person internally, and they were
Okay.
very, very good at talking about their culture and what do we stand for, it just internally. And then what's funny is that if you do a good job of that, you don't need to do as much external, because now your workforce is the one marketing for you,
Right.
because they're telling everybody what it's like to work there and why it's so great and what kind of great work you do. And there's nothing that speaks to a client or prospect more than hearing the person they're working with extol the virtues of the company.
Right, they're just living and breathing it. Yeah, and there is a point I wanna make. which is a lot of folks when they do think about brand, especially B2B folks, or even thinking about this internal campaign stuff, think about what they need to say. What's the message? And really, they need to think about what do they need to express. And that's a lot of behavior, that's a lot of body language, that's a lot of nonverbal, it's a lot of actions, not just what you say. So for instance, the team I worked with out in Ohio, they wanted to be a boutique premium brand. That was their ideal image or ideal position in the market. And I said, "Great. What kind of toilet paper?" I keep coming back to toilet paper, man. "What kind of toilet paper do you have in your offices?" And they gave me this big blank stare. And I said, "Well, okay, that might be a stretch, but if you're a boutique premium company, do you have boutique premium amenities? Like, do you have Kirkland brand coffee or do you have an espresso machine in the office?" Um, and if you want to be like Land Rover, which is a premium brand and a little bit boutique, it's not huge, go to the Land Rover dealership and look at what coffee setup they've got and look at what lounge chair they have for the people waiting for their Land Rover to get serviced, because apparently they get serviced all the damn time. And look at what toilet paper they have. I literally did this recently. I was at this cool boutique sexy hotel in Chicago, and the toilet paper was chintzy, and I was like, come on, give me some luxury toilet paper." But when it comes to your folks, and you said there was that one design firm
Mhm.
that got it, but for the others, it sounds like they have this need, clear need, and it would be useful to get clarity on their brand, to be more intentional about their brand, and then to launch that campaign, not just what they say, but what they do internally first.
Yeah, and I think that to your point, I think the challenge is are they willing to live up to it?
Yeah,
Like everybody will extol, well, everybody will share this is what we imagine ourselves to be, but then when they go through those questions, well, what about here and what about there? And do we show it? And what are we doing here? Then it becomes, I hate to say this, a little overwhelming for them and they just get
yeah,
frustrated.
yeah.
But I will tell you, the company you mentioned that you worked with in their bathroom, they have logo towels
Oh,
on the sink that are really thick, heavy. Like if you wash your hands, there's a
right,
stack of them there and they have their logo on them because I noticed them the last time I was there. I'm like, well, this is pretty. This, and again, it
right.
isn't. See, here's the funny thing. It's like there's this old organizational change model, and it's Herzberg's theory, like two need theory, and
Okay.
one of them is that the theory is there are certain things you do that don't really add; they can only detract,
Mm,
right? And then the other things are things that add. And I think that when it comes to those kinds of things, what you just mentioned are things that don't necessarily add, but if you don't have them, they detract.
right.
Like you don't expect them, but you notice when they're not there.
Yeah,
To your point, you go to that great hotel and it's cheap toilet paper. If it was expensive toilet paper, it wouldn't have elevated the experience. It was what you expected,
correct.
right? So then you have to understand what those are that are going to detract. Then and then there's a cost associated with it, but there's also a cost associated with not having it.
So absolutely, that there's a phrase I like: everything your organization does can erode or build the brand.
Mhm.
And yeah, there are a lot of things that can quickly erode it if you don't live up to expectations. Like if you go to a nice restaurant and the floor is sticky, bingo. Like
Yeah,
I didn't even have to say anything else. You get that image instantly and it's visceral.
yeah,
Doesn't matter how good the steak is. If you're like sticking to the floor, forget it.
yeah.
I think that you're right. Some of these companies, they'll be overwhelmed. They'll worry there's too much to live up to. Are there examples you've heard or seen? And granted, the design company might be the outlier, but others where they kind of get it because they do appreciate the value of, let's say, washing your fleet of trucks in the morning before you
Mhm.
take them to the job site. You
Oh
know,
yeah, I think I think when it comes to certain pieces of their business, they're like that. Like I have a large second generation electrical contractor here that I work with, and all of their trucks are completely wrapped. They all look great. They're all washed. They're so from that standpoint, they do that what I'll call operational things.
right?
But when it comes to what you mentioned, or like softer, things they don't
Mhm.
pay as much attention to, although they're equally as important. Now they do great things. They do they've done stuff for years, like picnics and all, and their routine. And people, I mean, there are people that have worked at this place. I work with their leadership team. One of the guys has worked there 44 years.
Wow. That's
And
great.
so they obviously, and that's when I look at a company and go, it's there. You're doing all the stuff. You're just
Yeah.
not wrapping it up and talking about it in a way that everybody can make sense of it.
Yeah, maybe that's the gateway. Maybe you're right. When especially B2B folks who think branding is kind of esoteric and they don't have time for it and they're too busy running a company to putz around with brand crap. Those behavioral examples are kind of a beautiful gateway into them understanding that's
Mm,
branding.
right.
When you wrap your truck with color and design and your phrase or your logo or whatever it is, that's a level of branding. When you clean your truck every morning before taking it to the job site, that's making sure it's on brand. When you the other one I love working with B2B, especially in manufacturing or construction or factories, knowing what to wear. Are you going to be on the shop floor
Mhm.
or are you going to go talk to your bankers? Folks who run B2B companies, they dress very different in those two situations.
Yeah.
You don't want to wear some flashy fancy suit when you're going to the shop floor,
Right.
because that's an internal branding thing.
Hmm.
So they get those behaviors, and I think maybe those would be really cool bridges that they understand already, that they do already, to then bridge them up to the bigger idea of, so then you just need to solidify some of the softer things or some of the more abstract things or some of the beliefs into that all that is your brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just as a to wrap that up, it, it's all brand.
Yeah.
Right. It really is how you talk internally to people, how you do your evaluation process, all of those things are elements of how you show up. And to me, how you show up is your brand.
Yes.
And you kind of referenced it earlier. I think the most important thing is just consistency.
Hmm.
Like it's predictability. That's what
Yep.
brand is. Brand is I know how you're going to show up. And that's why I like you because I know what to expect. Now I can make a choice whether I want it or not, but my
Yep.
choice is largely based on I know what to expect and you
Yeah.
show up the same way. And I think that's important for leaders to understand.
Yeah. There's some really neat science coming out about how the brain is an expectation machine.
Well, it's actually a
And
prediction machine.
yes, it's a prediction machine, right? Prediction and expectation.
Yeah.
You've probably been reading the same books I've been reading and listening to the same podcasts. And it's really cool because um, it means that instead of being like a video camera, like our eyes, don't just passively take in data and then process it later in the brain. The eyes are very actively figuring out what to expect from the world.
Hmm.
Should we expect the sidewalk to move? Should we expect the trees to fall on us or not? And that's why things that defy expectation are so engaging and attracting. But when it comes to brands, when it comes to your business, you're setting up expectations for your employees and also your customers and also your prospects.
Yeah.
And so to be clear and to be intentional, those two things seem to be really big messages from what we've been talking about
Hmm.
today.
Well, I agree. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And I'm really smitten with this idea that the first campaign should be internal.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely has to be because if I'm not who who's talking to the client? Like if there's not absolute alignment and intention with everybody in the organization, then they're the ones by and large, you got everybody else in the organization is the one talking to the client. Are they carrying that message forward? Do they even know what the message is? That way,
Right.
much to the company you worked with here in Columbus, they wanted to make sure that everybody they brought in was steeped in that message so
Yep.
that they kind of represented, they kind of lived that message. They didn't just talk about it, they showed up as that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm guessing is if this is a muscle that a lot of these owners, first gen, second gen owners, small business owners, B2B owners, that might not be a muscle that they have or something that they see a lot. How do they get help? What do they do?
Well, I think I think to your point, I think it just takes the recognition that you're already doing it. Like I think that was a great point because it's like you don't have to start anything. See, that's the thing most of these folks don't want to do. They want to start something else they have to worry about. No,
Right.
you're already doing, this, and this are already elements of it. So now all we're talking about doing is maybe doing a little bit of this and a little bit of this with all the stuff you're already doing. Now you've got momentum, right? And I think it's just reframing for people to understand that part of it and being told, no, you're already doing a half a dozen things that are brand related. Now we can just kind of amp those things up to get you a better result. And then back to the original question about brand science. Now, if we can tie some kind of return to that, we can actually see what we're getting as a benefit
Right.
of that. Now I want to do more of it because it isn't esoteric. It isn't voodoo. Like we're not just spending money for and hopeful that something happens. We actually see a return.
Right. We're not just doing monogrammed towels in our bathroom
Right.
just because we want to.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? The feeling I get sometimes from especially the B2B business leaders is they just kind of need to go to a stylist. Go to someone who can cut your hair the right way, give you a new wardrobe that's a little more up to date, but also is more you.
Hmm.
Get to know you, get to know your company, and then, like you said, feed you back a clear statement and a clear little internal campaign about your company and your brand. And then you can use that to onboard new team members and employees. You can use
Yeah.
that to guide how you put together an internal event,
Hmm.
or even how do you express or communicate something to your company without resorting to the dreaded memo. Yeah.
Yeah. You got to pick the right medium.
Yep. Pick the right medium. And then, yeah, get that external help. That is kind of the role I played for the team out there, for the for
Hmm.
the financial advising company, was they just needed someone outside to say, who can you help us remember who we are and give us a little, a new wardrobe that's updated but still makes us feel like ourselves. It's like a makeover on Oprah or something like that. And I'm definitely not the Oprah. I'm the stylist in the back saying, I think you should, wear slightly more fitted pants. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good
I
stuff.
agree.
Yeah. It's fun to talk about this in the real world. This brand science stuff can feel esoteric. A lot of what I do is pull these things out of academia.
Hmm.
And then it's great to get it out into the real world and say, well, what does it mean for a construction firm or a financial firm or a manufacturer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think that this is a micro macro kind of thing, right? Because I think every leader should have their own brand. Like they have to represent, they have to understand who they are and how they come across. And if they look at it at that kind of micro level, then they can build on that and understand the impact everywhere else because it does have an impact. And if I understand
Oh
it
yeah.
from a personal standpoint, then I can understand from a leadership team standpoint, an organizational standpoint, all of those other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great final thought of knowing that you, in a sense, have your own reputation and your own
Mhm.
impact on people and your own image that people have of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting, Perry.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It was great, Ethan.
Absolutely. I think this is really great and important to talk to folks who are struggling with the branding piece, struggling with or not knowing how brand science would apply to their real world, real life situation. It's
Yeah.
great to hear. And it's great to talk to you as always.
Yeah, great to chat with you as well.
Have a lovely day. We'll talk soon.
All right, see you, Ethan.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Are you planning a big team offsite, a sales meeting, or a large company event, and you want to bring in a speaker who will blow people away? Then your first call should be Oprah. But if you can't get Oprah, call me. Also, if you got something out of this episode, think of one person who might also get something out of it and send it to them as a way of saying, hey, thinking of you.